In January 2013, a 21-year-old college student named Elisa Lam arrived in Los Angeles during a solo trip across the United States. Just a few days later, she vanished. Weeks after her disappearance, police released a surveillance video from inside a hotel elevator. What was captured on that footage shocked the internet. More than a decade later, people are still debating what really happened. This is the story of Elisa Lam. Before she became the center of one of the internet's most famous mysteries, Elisa Lam was just a normal young woman. Born in Vancouver, Canada, Elisa was the daughter of immigrant parents and a student at the University of British Columbia. Friends described her as intelligent, creative, and deeply interested in writing. She often shared her thoughts online through blogs and social media. Like many young adults, Elisa enjoyed traveling and exploring new places. In early 2013, she decided to take a solo trip along the west coast of the United States. Her journey included several major cities, and for the most part, everything appeared normal. She stayed in contact with her family and regularly updated her experiences online. There were no signs that anything unusual was about to happen. However, Elisa had been living with bipolar disorder for several years. According to family members, there had been periods when missing medication caused severe mood swings and episodes of paranoia. Despite these challenges, she continued to travel, study, and document her life online. Nothing suggested that this trip would end differently. But that would change when she arrived in downtown Los Angeles and checked into a hotel with a reputation unlike any other. The hotel Elisa chose wasn't just another budget hotel in Los Angeles. It was the Cecil Hotel. Opened in 1924, the Cecil was once designed to attract business travelers and tourists. But over the decades, its reputation changed dramatically. The hotel became associated with crime, violence, overdoses, and unexplained deaths. Multiple suicides were reported inside the building throughout its history. Some of America's most notorious criminals were even linked to the hotel. Serial killer Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, stayed there during the 1980s. Another serial killer, Jack Unterweger, was also connected to the property years later. By the time Elisa arrived in 2013, the Cecil Hotel had already become one of the most infamous hotels in America. To many people, it felt like a place surrounded by tragedy, and within days of checking in, Elisa Lam would become part of that history. During the first few days of her stay, Elisa appeared to be enjoying her trip. She visited local attractions, explored the city, and stayed in contact with her family. But then, something changed. On January 31st, 2013, Elisa suddenly stopped communicating. For her family, this was immediately alarming. Throughout her trip, she had regularly checked in with her parents. Missing a call wasn't normal for her. As concern grew, her family contacted authorities. A missing person investigation was launched. Police searched the hotel. Investigators also learned that Elisa had been sharing a room with other guests during the early part of her stay. According to reports, some roommates complained about her unusual behavior. Staff eventually moved her to a private room. At the time, nobody imagined these details would later become important. Officers questioned staff members and reviewed security footage. But there was no sign of Elisa. It was as if she had simply vanished. Days passed without answers. Then investigators discovered a piece of surveillance footage that would completely change the case. On February 13th, nearly 2 weeks after Elisa disappeared, police released surveillance footage from inside one of the hotel's elevators. The video was only a few minutes long, but it quickly became one of the most analyzed pieces of footage on the internet. At first, nothing seems unusual. Elisa enters the elevator alone and begins pressing several buttons. Investigators later noted that she appeared to press multiple floor buttons in quick succession. Some observers believe she may have been trying to keep the elevator from moving. Others argue she was simply confused or disoriented. Whatever the reason, it remains one of the most discussed moments in the entire case. Then things become strange. Instead of waiting for the elevator to move, she suddenly steps toward the doorway and looks outside. Moments later, she quickly moves back inside. She appears nervous, almost as if she is reacting to something beyond the camera's view. Then she starts moving in and out of the elevator. At one point, she hides in a corner. A few seconds later, she begins making unusual hand movements. To many viewers, it looked as though she was talking to someone who wasn't visible on camera. But perhaps the strangest detail involved the elevator itself. Despite Elisa pressing multiple buttons, the doors remained open for an unusually long period of time. Finally, Elisa walks away. She disappears from view, and she is never seen alive again. Within hours of the footage being released, millions of people began debating what they had just watched. As the footage spread across the internet, theories began appearing everywhere. Some people believed Elisa was being followed by someone outside the elevator. Others thought she was hiding from a person who remained just outside the camera's view. More extreme theories suggested paranormal activity. The Cecil Hotel's dark reputation only made those ideas more popular. Online forums filled with speculation. YouTube videos analyzed the footage frame by frame. Every movement, every gesture, and every second of the video became part of a larger mystery. But despite millions of views and countless investigations by internet users, one major problem remained. None of these theories were supported by evidence. Police found no sign of another person in the footage. Investigators found no evidence of an attack. And toxicology reports showed no signs of illegal drugs influencing Elisa's behavior. The mystery was growing, but the facts were pointing in a very different direction. Nearly 3 weeks after Elisa disappeared, guests at the hotel began complaining about the water. Some reported unusual taste. Others complained about low water pressure. Hotel staff were asked to investigate the problem. On the morning of February 19th, a maintenance worker went to inspect the rooftop water tanks. What he discovered shocked everyone. Elisa Lam's body was found inside one of the tanks. Even more disturbing, some of her clothing was later found floating inside the tank. Yet investigators found no evidence of physical trauma or assault. The news immediately made headlines around the world. But instead of answering questions, the discovery created even more. How had she reached the roof? How had she entered the water tank? And why had nobody found her sooner? The mystery that had already captured the internet suddenly became even more disturbing. After months of investigation, authorities eventually released their findings. According to the Los Angeles County coroner, there was no evidence that Elisa had been physically attacked. Toxicology reports found no illegal drugs in her system. Investigators also found no evidence that another person had been involved in her death. The official cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning. The report also noted that Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Investigators believed her mental health may have played a significant role in the events leading up to her death. Records suggested she had not been consistently taking all of her prescribed medication before her disappearance. For many experts, this offered the most likely explanation for her unusual behavior in the elevator footage. But despite the official findings, not everyone was convinced. Questions about the roof, the water tank, and the elevator footage continued to fuel debate for years. More than a decade has passed since Elisa Lam's death. Yet the case continues to fascinate millions of people around the world. Part of that fascination comes from the elevator footage. Even after hearing the official explanation, many viewers still find the video unsettling. Others point to the Cecil Hotel's history and believe there are details that remain unanswered. But perhaps the biggest reason this case remains so popular is because it sits at the intersection of fact and mystery. Cases like this remind us that the most haunting mysteries aren't always crimes. Sometimes the truth is far more complicated. A combination of isolation, mental health struggles, and circumstances can create questions that continue long after the investigation ends. Yet some questions still feel difficult to answer emotionally, and that gap between evidence and perception is exactly what keeps this story alive. Today, the official conclusion remains unchanged. Elisa Lam's death was ruled an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder considered a significant contributing factor. Whether you agree with that explanation or still have doubts, one thing is certain. The Elisa Lam case remains one of the most discussed mysteries in internet history. So what do you think? Was this simply a tragic accident? Or is there something about this case that still doesn't add up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe for more mysteries and true stories.